This is a story about decompression sickness and how quickly a routine dive can change. What was planned as a straightforward dive on a well-known wreck became an uncontrolled ascent, more than 20 minutes of missed decompression, and an emergency evacuation ending in recompression treatments. It's not a story about blame, it's about learning and using the lessons to become a safer diver. I'm really grateful to Tash Scott, who's here to tell me her story. So, welcome to my channel, Tash.
Thanks. It's great to be here and great to have an opportunity to give somebody a bit of learning from my experience.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it already, and it is a horrendous thing that happened to you. I think what we're going to do in this video is we're going to break it almost down into three chunks. We're going to talk about what happened. We're going to talk about how you are now, because it's great that you've made a full recovery, and then we're going to talk about the lessons. So Tash, the floor is yours. Please tell us what happened to you.
2020, Egypt had been cancelled, so we're at a bit of a loose end, and decided to head over to Portland and jump on a skin deeper charter and dive the Sunset, really well-known wreck in Portland. Lots and lots of people have dived it. It's one of those wrecks that you can argue if it's a technical wreck or not. Lots of arguments whether people consider it a technical dive. It's about 43 meters to the bottom. So I'd gone in on air, and my buddy was on Trimix, hubby was on a rebreather, and I was on twin 12s and stage. Relatively okay conditions as far as Portland goes, probably about force 4, a little bit cloudy, nothing to worry about. Jumped on in and gave my buddy the signal to say I was going down. And it was still running a little bit. There was probably 10 minutes before slack, which is about common for us out in Portland. So as I was dragging myself down the shot line, all that went through my head was, it's still running a little bit. So it's a little bit of effort to get down. It's still running. Shouldn't be this much effort, but I kind of ignored it. So that was, for me, warning sign number 1 that I ignored. I've been diving for many years. I should have known better, but there we go. Warning sign number 1. Got down to the bottom of the wreck. Beautiful. I've dived a Sunset many times, and this was amazing. It was one of the best dives I'd ever had on the Sunset. It was just...
Sorry to interrupt you there, Tash, but for those who don't know, probably just worth explaining why the Sunset is such an epic wreck. And I've only done it once a long time ago. I know it, but I know it's loved by people who go out of Portland.
Yeah, I mean, you can get inside, you can get a little bit disorientated inside sometimes. It's one of the wrecks that you can be inside without realizing you're inside sometimes as well, which can be cool or not cool depending on your outlook. There's lots to see. It's quite broken up in places. The top of it is around 34, so you can sort of open it out to slightly more recreational divers. The bottom about 43. It's just an iconic wreck for people.
P&O liner, I think.
The P&O liner, yeah. It's just really nice. So you can easily kill an hour on there without even realizing you've just killed an hour at 40 odd meters. So it's one of those that catches people out a little bit if they're not careful, because they quite often think that it's perhaps not a technical dive, more recreational. Probably a bit more technical when you factor everything else into that. But it's a great wreck, and on the given day with brilliant visibility, which it was on that day, it's just amazing, and time ticks away. We'd had a pretty good plan, no more than 30 minutes time to surface. We were both on twin 12s, plenty of decompression for us at that depth on twin 12s with lots of redundancy there. So quite happy with that plan. But as I'd got to 40 odd meters, I'd just realised that I hadn't really, apart from taking a squeeze off my suit, I hadn't really put a lot of air into my wing. Maybe a scush at best. And I suddenly thought to myself, oh, not got a lot of air in my wing. Not a problem. Probably warning sign number 2, which I also ignored, because at that point I was in proper Insta trim. I thought I looked pretty cool, and looking pretty cool at that moment in time was much better than worrying about how much air I'd put in my wing.
So you dive using both your dry suit and your wing for buoyancy?
Yeah, so I dive with my dry suit, just taking the squeeze off so it's comfortable, and then I dive with my wing for the main buoyancy on a dive when I was on twins anyway. Yeah, I was just going along. We had a beautiful dive. The viz was amazing, as I said, and everything felt great. Plenty of checks with the buddy. Probably only about 6 of us on the wreck, because during COVID we were still on half boat rules. So it was really nice. It wasn't cluttered with people at all down there. Had a great dive. I couldn't say any more other than it was a great dive to that point. So we'd got to probably about 28 minutes time to surface, when a quick signal to the buddies to flick the DSMB up. And we moved up to slightly higher part of the wreck. It's probably about 32 meters, something like that. And just moved away like you would from your buddy to give yourself some clearance, put the DSMB up, pop the DSMB up, and then we signaled to head for our 24-meter switch depth. So at 24 meters, the plan was to switch to our decompression gas, had about 50% on. So as we were going up to that 24 meters, I was starting to feel a little bit light. A little bit lighter than I'd like to be. So I was just, shaking a bit on the dry suit, feeling like the dry suit had a little bit more air in than I would have liked. I was trying to get it out. Got to 24 meters, feeling a little bit uncomfortable, to be honest. And at this point, I was probably another warning sign where I'm feeling uncomfortable, but I'm just focused on, I've got to switch my gas. I've got to get myself ready to reel in to go to my next decompression depth. So I kind of ignored it. Now, if I'd not ignored it, I may have looked for something on the wreck at a more sensible depth that I could just check things and what have you, but I didn't. I ignored it. So as I look at my buddy, and before I can even think about anything, I've just about managed to switch my gas and change my computer to show that I'd done the gas switch, when this is where it all really went wrong. And it's hard to explain, because if you were to look at my profile, which I know you have, it's seconds, really. It feels like a lifetime, but it also feels like you haven't necessarily got as much time to do as much as you would like. It's the weirdest feeling. There was no fear at that point. I didn't have time to be worried, or it was mitigation. Everything at this point is now mitigation. I now know I've got a problem, and it's all starting to go wrong, and it's a typical incident pit.
You started to ascend now. You've left the deco stop. You're realising that you're missing stops, and you're heading up to the surface.
Yeah. So as I'm missing my next stop, so my next stop was 21. I only had a minute there. Actually, not the end of the world to miss a minute at 21. It'll pick it up. Not the end of the world at that point. So I've still got time to fix myself. As I'm going up, I'm getting a bit flustered. The DSMB, I'm starting to feel like I'm catching that up, and the string is sort of starting to go below me, which is another hazard. And as I'm trying to fix that, I managed to knock my mask off. I managed to get the mask back in place and emptied again. In that process, I've knocked my reg, so I've got the reg back in again. And all of this time, I'm still going up, and I'm still furiously trying to dump everything I've got to stop myself from going up. My buddy's nowhere to be seen. That is not a dig at the buddy. Everything's happening really quick, and he hasn't got a clue what's actually going on, because I've not communicated it to him, to be fair, because I didn't think about it, didn't have time, other things to worry about.
No, it's not your priority. When you've got stuff like that going on, telling your buddy what's happening is definitely not a priority, is it?
Yeah. And by this point, I know you've dived out of Portland. When you're in that kind of mid-depth, you can't see a thing. You turn around, there's nothing around you. There's nothing to see. There's no visual references. I know I'm going up, not down, because I can see that I'm coming up to my string. So I know I'm at least orientated correctly. But other than that, there's just nothing. There's just nothing around, and it's all going wrong. And at this point, I'm thinking, all I have to do is keep breathing, because the last thing I want to do is then have other issues to contend with, lung issues and all of that from holding your breath. And furiously, the string is getting closer to me, and I can't get away from the string. And before I know it, I'm tangled in the string somewhere. And I think, do you know what? I might as well just give up with the DSMB. I can't reel it in. I haven't got time to do that. I can't do anything with it. It's locked off at this point. So, you know, I've let go of the DSMB, which is attached to me anyway, and I'm still going up. And I can't explain how bizarre the feeling of having an uncontrolled descent is, except it feels like it's really slow, but it's not. It's weird. I get to the surface and I look around and I look like literally a cat's had a ball of wool. There's just string from my DSME everywhere, all over me. I don't even know where to start. So I wave to the boat, and all I could think of, I'm on the surface. That's good. I'm breathing. I'm alive. I'm very, very aware that I have missed 20 plus minutes of decompression. Acutely aware of that. So
you're still on your 50% mix.
I'm still on the 50%, and I keep that in my mouth the whole time because I am slightly conscious of that. So wave to the boat, the skipper comes over and he looks at me and goes, "What on earth have you done?" And I didn't really have an explanation, because actually at that moment in time, apart from the fact that I'd had an uncontrolled descent, I hadn't figured out why. So I didn't really know why it had happened. That all comes a little bit later when you've got the benefit of hindsight and
beautiful thing, hindsight.
Absolutely. You know, and all I could think of is, could I have done anything else? And I don't think I could have done anything different on that dive. I don't think there was anything that I could have done unless I'd listened to all of those 3 warning signs that I'd had and very, very foolishly chinned off on that dive. So I got to the surface, the skipper kind of drags me out, tangled in this DSMB, and he starts walking around, unraveling me, asking me if I'm okay. And I actually feel fine. I feel perfectly fine. Now, I then start to think to myself, I'll just stay on my 50%. I'll wait for the boys to get out. Slowly, the guys come out and they're looking at me, sat in my kit, still breathing my gas, and say, "Are you okay?" My buddy comes out, and he knows what I've done. So he knows the situation. He knows what I've missed, because he would have done the same decompression as me. So he kind of looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you're okay?" I said, "I feel fine. I feel absolutely fine. Do you want to go 100%? No, I'll be fine." Now, stupid, absolutely stupid, because if I had any of my mates diving with me that had just done that, the first thing I'd be doing is telling them to get on 100%. But I didn't even listen to my own advice. Completely bonkers. I don't know why. I don't know why you make the decisions at the time you make them. I was not in denial. I was acutely aware I'd missed all of that decompression and could potentially have a problem. I absolutely wasn't in denial. I don't know why. I can't understand why I didn't at that point say, "Do you know what, I'll go on 100%. So probably maybe 15 minutes went by and I'm still feeling okay. And then a little bit of sanity starts to kick in. And I just turn around to the skipper and goes, "Do you know what? I'll have the 100%. And he said, "If I put you on 100%, I've got to call it in." I went, "That's fine." Because at this point, I'm thinking, now's not time to take any risks. So off I go into the cabin, lie on 100%, breathing away. He calls it in. I hear on the radio, I was quite excited actually. If there's ever a time to be excited that you've potentially got decompression illness, is that the Prince might be flying. So my lift might actually come from Prince Harry, who just happened to be on the William, sorry, yeah, Prince William.
Don't want the ginger one.
You just so
the bald one.
Exactly.
Everyone prefers the bald one. We know that.
So I was like, oh, that'd be quite good, wouldn't it? You know, make sure I got my camera ready and all this, and not really thinking about anything. There was a few incidents that day in different areas, and the chopper was a bit late. That one got diverted. I ended up with one from a different area. So I think it was probably about 2 o'clock, and I'd been out of the water maybe about an hour. And all of a sudden, somebody touched my leg, and I thought, hang on a minute, I didn't feel that. So I started touching my legs, and I had nothing. I couldn't feel. You could have got a knife and stab in the leg. I wouldn't have realised. I had no other symptoms. I could breathe perfectly fine. I had no itching. I had no pain at that time, other than I'd lost that feeling in my legs. And at that point, I just suddenly thought to myself, that can only be one thing. That's got to be a spinal bend that is causing that, which probably was the first time that I started to have a few concerns, if I'm honest. Up to that point, I was quite chilled out, for want of a better word, a bit complacent about it all, a bit not that bothered. Then all of a sudden, I had no legs, which is quite scary, actually. You know, the boys are making jokes about it. They're trying to keep light. I think George was more concerned. He had to pack my twin set away and wash it down, and carry it off the boat along with his unit. So, you know, which, yeah, I felt a bit bad at. Not really. No, sorry, not sorry. Lots of jokes going on, and I couldn't get it out of my head. I could not get out of my head that I could not feel my legs.
So just to go for just to be absolutely clear on the timeline. So you hit the water, stayed on your 50%. About 15 minutes later, you went on to 100%.
Yep.
And then about an hour after surfacing was when you realised that you had symptoms in your lower legs.
Correct. So when I made the decision to go on the 100%, it was just my sanity saying, I need to go on it because that's the right thing to do, rather than me having a symptom that drove me to it, which is probably a good thing, because if I hadn't, things could have been even worse, I guess. So yeah, probably around about 2 o'clock, I think, the chopper turned up, and I was genuinely actually starting to get a bit of feeling back on my legs at this point, and I was starting to get a bit of stomach pain, really. Lower kind of abdominal stomach pain was the other kind of symptom that kicked in quite late. Well, I say late, I don't suppose an hour or two is late, but I certainly never had any of these symptoms at the very beginning, which just goes to show.
I mean, all the people I know who've had something like this, the symptoms have come on, I think, much later than people think they should come on. You think they should get them within quite a short period, but they all seem to come on much later.
Yeah, definitely. The chopper turns up, and this is where you have to absolutely appreciate all of the skills of our services, like the Coast Guard, and the boat crew were phenomenal. The skin deeper guys were phenomenal. You know, they have a process, they're trained to do it, but I'd never seen it actually in action, where, you know, all of the comms between the crews, to put some context behind it for people, is they're given a heading and the knots to travel at, and the boat does exactly what the helicopter crew tell them to do. The helicopter then matches that, and they're just going along. Until you see it on a video, it's quite hard to imagine, but it's phenomenal to watch, and it's as slick as anything if you get the right crew, and it was textbook for us. The crew were amazing. Winchman comes down and jumps on the back of the boat, comes out, and did some assessment on me. Again, we got COVID, so they asked a few COVID questions, which kind of, I was a little bit cross, actually, that they seem to be focused on the COVID, and I'm thinking, I can't feel my legs, and you're more worried about COVID, right? It seemed a bit barbaric to me at the time, but, you know, I suppose my mind wasn't quite focused on the same things as perhaps the crew were. But they jump on the back, and then you get shoved into a harness, and you get lifted with what you're wearing. I think I was still in my undersuit from memory. Might have had a pair of flip-flops in my hand and my phone to phone George if I needed to, and off I went. I'm a Weymouth girl. I've lived there for many years. Moved away in my 30s, and I don't think I've ever seen a view like that of Weymouth and Portland. Yeah, it was beautiful, and took my mind off it for a little bit as you're getting winched up, which is quite an experience in itself. It's kind of cool and not cool, because you know why you're getting winched up. But all of the boats were out there. All of the cruise ships had been moored up for COVID, and there was just 7 or 8. The Disney boat was there. There was all sorts out in the harbour, so it was some view. And you know, our skin deeper was getting smaller and smaller as I was heading off. And sadly, I had no prints flying either, which was a bit of a shame. But yeah, I got on there, and I'm obviously on O2 at this point still, so they've put me on a mobile O2 unit in the helicopter, and then I have an argument with them about whether or not they're going to put a drip on. Again, it's one of those things that hydration is key, isn't it? If you've got something like this, O2 and hydration, two really things you absolutely need to minimise your problems. And I'm terrified of needles, which some will laugh at because I'm covered in tattoos, but I can guarantee you it's not the same. It's not the same. So I had an argument about this because I knew I'd pass out if they shoved this needle in. It's in the worst place as well, where they put it in your arm corner. What do you call it? Your inner arm. Elbow in, yeah. And yeah, so I had an argument with them over this, and I don't know how they persuaded me to have it done. But yeah, which, you know, I passed out because I'm terrified of needles, and then came back round again, and we were off. Not long, actually, because we're only going to pool. Very sadly, the pool chamber has since been closed down, which, having been a diver who's used that facility, makes me a little sad, because was our closest facility to Portland. And now I think we would go to DDRC in Plymouth, would be our next option. But yeah, so went over, they took me, got met by the 4-wheeled Coast Guard, who whizzed me into A&E, which was like, I don't know, it was like a scene out of a movie, because it was full of people with COVID, and everybody was in hazmat, and it was quite bizarre. And here I am with O2, a drip, an epoxy mask on, and like everybody's in hazmat suits. It's quite weird. I was quite frustrated at this point, because it's probably about maybe 3 o'clock by this point, 3:30, something like that. Dive doc was there to meet me. As soon as we got into a cubicle, the dive doc was in there. I had a chat with him. He, based on what I told him, definitely you've got to come to the chamber. However, we haven't used the chamber really with COVID, and we don't know what is going to happen if we put somebody who's got COVID in the chamber, and how that would affect the chamber, and you know, you breathing out potentially COVID. So they were really concerned about putting me in the chamber, and basically refused to put me in until I'd had a COVID test. And I know, I don't, you know, it's bizarre, isn't it? It feels bizarre to me at the time. So they gave me a COVID test. But this is like before COVID tests were quick, and before you had that little magic thing that you could get from Tesco's and Boots, and 15 seconds later you've got a result. I had to go off to a lab. It was quite some time before the results came back. I think it was about 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, wow.
Before the results came back to say that I was clear from COVID, and could go to the chamber. Dive doc came round. Chamber is actually located at the hospital with Paul. It's just in another part of it. So jump in the car, ran the one-way system to the back of the hospital, and there was the chamber. So it was a 2-minute drive away, which was fine. This is where the dive doc does a few tests, a few typical, can you, a bit like the sobriety test in America, you know, can you stand on one foot, can you walk in a straight line, all of these kind of tests, and said, yes, you definitely need to go in the pot.
So you'd not had any neuro tests before then? You hadn't had any on the boat, or you hadn't had any, crewmen hadn't done any or anything like that? Okay.
No. Nothing in helicopter either. You know, it was nothing like that. By this point, actually, I'd had all the feeling come back in my legs as well. So I've now got everything feeling fine in my legs. I've still got a bit of abdominal pain, no itching, no other soreness, no other symptoms. And I seem to remember.
But you've been on oxygen the whole time from that kind of 15 minutes after the dive, all the way through to here. You're on 100% oxygen the whole time.
All the time. So by which time I felt like I had a sore throat, because anyone that has any oxygen for any length of time or nitrox or anything, you do get a little bit dry, a bit tickly, a bit, you know, fed up of actually breathing oxygen. So they kitted me out. They don't like you to wear your normal clothes in the chamber. They're very fussy. So kitted me out with a load of chamber clothes, and looked like I just come out of Asda's clothing department, and off I go in the pot for 6 hours. The pot is weird. I've heard people say that they get claustrophobic in it. I didn't get claustrophobic, but it's not comfortable. You're either
in there with you, presumably.
Yeah, I had somebody in there with me the whole time. They take you down to 18 meters and they're throwing 100% at you. So for anyone who can do the maths, your PPO2 is quite high, which triggered me a little bit. And I was like, and he looked at me and says, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking about your PPO2, aren't you? And I said, I am. He said, it's fine. We've done this before. So yeah, it's I think it runs at something like 2.8 in the chamber. So it's quite high. But what they do is they put essentially, for anyone who's seen Futurama and they see the fishbowl head, so they put like a dry suit ring around your neck with the rubber latex seal, and then a fishbowl head that feeds the O2 into the chamber and into your head while you're in the chamber. So you can't lie back. You can't, you know, wherever you go, you've got this ring all the way around you. It's proper, and you can't sleep. So
I always think about those dogs, you know, with collars. Yes. You know, I've seen pictures exactly of like people wearing those things, and they do kind of remind me a bit of like that. So you can't scratch your ears or whatever it is.
Yeah. You know, you get an itch in your nose or something, or an itchy eye, you literally can't do anything. It's proper uncomfortable. And they pop you on that for 20 minutes, and then every 20 minutes they take the lid off, leave the neck seal on, and you can breathe the chamber air, and they flush the chamber, constantly flush the chamber in that 5 minutes. And it's really cold, actually, when they're flushing it. It's really quite chilly. So it can be really hot, and then it can be really cold. It's not comfortable. Anyone who says you go in the chamber and have a kip for 6 hours, you can't. It's not pleasant. I wouldn't recommend it. So had that 6 hour session. He made the decision that I didn't need to go back. Well, actually he made the decision to say, assess your symptoms, give me a shout, and then we'll see whether we need to put you back in again. The following day, I had a little bit of numbness on my face. Visual was really weird. I felt like I needed my glasses more than ever. Maybe a little bit of soreness in my leg. But that slowly disappeared and until there were no symptoms at all.
That's obviously great news. You had the 1 6 hour.
1 6 hour.
I guess what happened to you after that, you know, how long did it take? I mean, I know you're diving. I know you've done some fantastic diving since then. What was the process from finishing your chamber treatment to getting back in the water and then progressing? What did that look like?
I would say I had a bit of PTSD from it, if I'm honest.
Okay.
So I had 28 days out. I was just given the standard 4 weeks out. And my first dive back in was in Capernwray. So for anyone who doesn't know where Capernwray is, it's very much a shallow, muddy puddle in the north of England with a few friendly fish, which is the bit that makes it a bit more exciting, I think. I was okay with that. That was all right. And slowly felt a little bit more comfortable being back in. I don't think I was worried about going back in. What I was worried about, and where the PTSD came in, was anything that I used the DSMB for. The DSMB became the trigger for me. And I've not dived a soul set since. And I've been offered several times to do a dive in the soul set. And I'm not there with being comfortable going back there. I've not done it yet.
That's really weird, isn't it? How you have those kind of, things that you associate with, with stuff. And I guess the nature of any sort of traumatic. Have you made your peace with the DSMBs though?
I have, but it did take me a very long time. So for a very long time, I wouldn't stray from the shop very long. So, I'd go off for a dive with George. I think we'd gone out the west coast of Scotland on a week out there. And I'd start to feel my sac rate was rising when I'd get a distance from the shot where I couldn't see the shot anymore, because that meant I might have to put my DSMB up, and then that stress level would start rising. So I would never really stray from that, and it took a really, really long time for me to start getting comfortable. I found that I was overweighting myself, probably up here, overweighting myself. But slowly I was starting to get more and more comfortable with the DSMB, and I think it probably easily took me a year before I felt comfortable going out and throwing a DSMB up from depth. So I was okay if it was in 20 meters, but if I was in a 50-meter dive, I had nerves. I had massive nerves. It triggered me in ways I didn't think it would trigger me. Really, really bizarre. I didn't think I was the sort of person that would be affected by things like that. I just crack on and get on with it. But it did affect me for quite some time.
That's really fascinating. I think something that perhaps people don't really talk about when they talk about diving incidents. They talk about the immediate stuff, the oxygen treatment, the chamber treatment, all those sorts of things. But people don't often think about, what it's like afterwards. If obviously some people don't never get back in the water, but clearly, well done you for getting in. But interesting that you've had these kind of mental blocks, because when we talk about what actually happened, it wasn't the DSMB that was the issue, really, was it?
No, not at all.
So it's kind of weird that you've associated that with the DSMB when it wasn't really the DSMB's fault.
No, but I guess what it is I know that if I'm on the DSMB and I have that problem, I've got nothing to grab, nothing to hold on to. If you're on a shot line and something goes wrong, you can hold on to the shot, and that's attached to something at the bottom, and whatever goes wrong, you can get yourself up without. Yeah. So I think that is why it triggered me a little bit, but it took me a really long time to get back comfortable with throwing a DSMB anything deeper than 20 meters. Never thought it would affect you. Just don't know how things are going to affect you until it happens, I guess.
I think that's absolutely true, and I think probably a good point actually to talk about what the things that you think did contribute to the incident, and kind of the other lessons that you've taken away from this.
I considered myself a really competent diver, and I think I was, but with competence can breed a bit of complacency. So I think I probably got a bit complacent with my diving and not done the level of checks that I should have done, which, now a diver rebreather, there's not really that many checks you have to do on open circuit. So to not even do them is really lazy. So I've only got myself to blame. But it kind of started out where I was in the process of buying a new undersuit and had to pay the deposit for that. So I sold my dry suit. So I sold my dry suit to pay for the deposit. Now that in itself wasn't a problem, because we were off to Egypt, so I could sell it. I knew I had time to come back from Egypt, pick up a new dry suit, and it would be absolutely fine. But that didn't happen, as we know, because we didn't go to Egypt. So we were then filling our time with doing a bit of diving in the UK. So somebody said, do you want to go to Stony Cove, go in a muddy puddle for a day? And I said, yeah, we'll do, as long as I can blag a dry suit off of somebody. So somebody lent me a dry suit. It wasn't fitting me correctly. The feet were 3 sizes too big. And I was like, that'd be fine. I'll shove an extra sock on. I'll just do the dive. It's only in Stony Cove. I'm not going to be that deep. It'll be fine. I'll figure it out.
I guess probably worth saying for people who don't have any idea what Stony Cove is, probably there'll be people from overseas who've never had the pleasure of going to Stony Cove, but it's another flooded quarry in not quite northern England, although it's kind of middle England. But it's probably, arguably, it's the most popular diving location in the UK, isn't it? Loads and loads of people go there. But it's kind of 30 odd meters, 35, maybe the maximum depth, I think.
Yeah, in the hydro box, about 34, 35. It's nothing too exciting. And to be honest, hydro box isn't that exciting, so I don't really go there that often. Yeah, so for me, the plan was I'm not going that deep. I'll probably just go to the Stangarth, which is, a little boat in about 18 to 20 meters of water. So I wasn't that fussed. That's fine. Dive actually went okay. And then somebody said, do you fancy doing the 1021, which is the most amazing dive in Newquay on a sub. I've just got
to do this. I've just got to do this, by the way, Tash, because anybody who's watching this, I have got a video of what it's like to dive the 1021, and I'll put a link somewhere up here so people can see it. But it is a stunningly wonderful dive, and if you haven't done it, you absolutely should. And if you've done it, you should probably do it again, because it's awesome.
It is awesome. And I kind of said, do you know what? I'd love to, but I've got a loaner dry suit. It's probably not sensible to do a techie dive with a suit that's not fitting me. I'm not comfortable doing it, so I backed away. And about a week later, the husband said, do you fancy doing a soul set? And without thinking, I just said yes. And I didn't even put that same logic to the soul set, which brings me back to the conversation right at the very beginning where I said, there's an argument over whether the soul set's considered a technical dive or a recreational dive. It's the more techie you become, a 43 meter dive feels recreational, I think. So, whatever way we look at it, on paper, it's a technical dive. So
I guess maybe the way to not look at it is whether it's technical or recreational. To look at it is it's a 40 odd meter dive. You're going to end up doing a reasonable amount of decompression, and therefore you need to be prepared and equipped and right space to do that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I'm on record somewhere as saying that I think 60, anything less than 60 is a shallow dive, and it's a horrendous thing to say. But we do absolutely. You get in that mindset, and it's a really, really bad place.
It is. So again, very not sensible decision by me. So just said yes, let's do it. So this had started a couple of weeks before the warning signs and the poor decision making, probably more than anything. Because I'd had a perfectly good dive in Stony Cove, which wasn't really going to present too many problems at 15, 20 meters. I didn't even think about it and just said, yeah, okay, we'll do it. Really, really poor decision making from me. So off we went.
But understandable.
I got no one else to blame, Dom. That's the problem. I have tried. So off we went, and that was great. And then I kind of looked at my kit and putting it all together, and that was fine. But what I hadn't checked either was had I put enough sea weights on, because I'd just been in the water with fresh water. So I was weighted for fresh water, and I'm genuinely not somebody who overweights. A lot of people overweight themselves, and I'm usually pretty spot on with my weighting. So what I dived in fresh was never going to be enough for the sea. I needed an extra couple of kilos, and I hadn't put that on, and I hadn't checked if I'd put it on either. So that again is something that I should have done, and I didn't. Just being a bit complacent, throwing the kit together, being a bit cocky already. My kit looks cool, so that's all that matters. I don't know what went through my head, but I didn't check it. I've got no excuses. I've got no one else to blame. And then we've got the dry suit, so I'm in the water, and the feet. Anyone that dives a dry suit, well, no, that's the worst place to get air trapped, is in your feet. It's so hard to get it out, and I've already got massive amount of space there that's available to store some air, and I just could not shake it. The other thing with a dry suit, which I didn't mention before, is I had a shoulder dump. Now, my dry suit only had a wrist dump. If I'm honest, I can't remember how I went in the water, whether I had it fully open. I just can't remember. I didn't routinely dive with a shoulder dump. So not only I'm in a dry suit that doesn't fit me, I'm in kit that I haven't really dived on into. And the smallest thing sometimes can be a problem if you've not dived it, and then you're throwing yourself in on a dive that really matters, that you need to make sure that you understand your kit. So yeah, a couple of things with the dry suit, poor decision making with that. I think, yeah, so to have a run up for a couple of weeks before the actual dive of things that should have triggered my brain not to do that dive, or to do it differently, or to think about it, or check my kit, or to add sea weight, or to even add extra weight for the fact that I had an ill-fitting dry suit. I shouldn't have done that. That shouldn't have even been a question, but I didn't do any of it. Yeah, so there were so many reasons running up to that should have triggered me. And then I had 3 warning signs throughout that dive. Why couldn't I pull myself down? I've never had a problem getting myself under, but somehow I attributed the current running to being the problem. But I've never done that before. I've never blamed the current before. So I think a combination of not adding my sea weight, and probably having air in my feet of my dry suit that was never going to come out really, just made me struggle to get under.
What's the difference between, do you think, your sea weight and your freshwater weight? Because what would you normally change? Only a kilo or 2 kilos maybe?
I put 2 kilos on between.
2 kilos.
Yeah. But 2 kilos matters when you're not overweighted.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's because I don't generally overweight myself. That 2 kilos really mattered. Yeah, so poor decision, dry suit, not being able to probably figure out quickly enough whether my dump was open, shut, or whatever it was. That was unfamiliar kit for me, not being able to get the air out, ignoring all of the signs. I had 3 signs throughout that dive that should have given me a warning sign that I might have had a problem, and I ignored every single one of them and pushed it off to being something else. It was a massive kick up the arse for me in my diving. Really massive kick up the arse. And I suffered for a year with having a problem putting a DSMB up. That kind of taints your diving a bit because you have to limit what you're doing. So I couldn't crack on and do what I would normally do. Luckily, George was really patient and kind of held my hand slowly throughout that process of trying to get me back from hugging the shot line to moving a bit further away from it, and then eventually getting them back out on. It was actually a really long time before I dived back out of Portland and threw a DSMB up. To be honest, it was quite a long time after that before I could get that back in my head to do that. But yeah, eventually I did. I still, even to this day, will always have a little apprehension until I reach my safe stop. And what I mean by that is if I can stop at 6 meters and hold that for 6 meters, that's glorious. That's happy days. I can, hang and have a little sleep and be quite comfortable at that point. But there's always a little bit of apprehension until I get to that point, but nothing like it was before. I don't panic or stress in the same way, but I think it's always in the back of my head. There's a lot of people that could have done that and not got bent. I've been on boat dives with people that have missed a lot more deco than that and been absolutely fine. It did make me think that, well, maybe I'm one of those people that just is a little bit bendy compared to others. I did have a few incidents after that. got checked out for PFO, was cleared for a PFO, basically told that I was one of those outliers. You know, all of that decompression theory is exactly that, isn't it? It's theory. So just because it says you're safe at this depth, it doesn't mean you're safe at that depth. So it's taken me, it made me make the decision to go to a unit to put myself on the best gas at all times. I love diving a unit now. I'm really happy on it. I'm really comfortable on it. But I'm super conservative. So it's also having that bend and realizing that perhaps not everybody would have got bent on that dive to that severity made me realize that my body composition, my age, there's lots of factors that we can attribute to potential DCIs. It just means I've got to be super careful, and I watch my GFs, I watch my surface GFs. I don't surface until my surface GF becomes a certain level, and if that means I've got to spend an extra 20 minutes in the water, so be it, because I don't ever want to go back in the pot again. So I've really changed the way I dive, my conservatism. Conservatism doesn't mean I don't go deep. I will still go deep. I will still do the decompression, but I might do a lot more decompression than some would. Might be there's an image of me just sat on the back of the boat at 3 meters, and I've done all my mandatory decompression. I'm literally just letting the surface GFs drop to what is safe for me, because what is safe for me isn't necessarily safe for someone else. Or so it's really made me think about the way I dive. As you know, being a rebreather diver yourself, I am still a slave to my checklist. I still check everything that I'm meant to check. There's a lot more checks than I ever did with open circuit. It's no longer, yes, I've got gas, off I go. There's a lot more to think about it. It's made me a lot more competent and less complacent overall, I would say. Plenty of lessons there. And I suppose everybody will have I would have done it better, I would have done this, I would have done that. You don't know what you're going to do until you're in that situation. And I should imagine everybody's made stupid mistakes. They've just got away with it. And one day you won't, like me. Yeah, it's all about learning, isn't it?
It's been really fascinating talking to you, Tash. Thanks for reaching out and offering to do this. That's really appreciated. What I would say to other people out there is if you want to do something similar to Tash, if you've got a story to tell you think would be useful for other divers, then once again, please get in touch with me, and I would love to have you on the channel to talk about what happened to you. If you've enjoyed listening to this, I have loads of other incidents. If I'm honest, most of them involving me, which is and once again, I'll put a link in the description, and there's one up here somewhere as well, and you can go and watch those. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening. Most of all, obviously, thank you very much for Tash. I'm Dom Robinson, Deep Wreck Diver, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.